But if only you could see them, you would know from their faces there were kings and queens, followed by princes and princesses. There were future power people, from the love to the loveless, shining a night 'cause they wanted it to see. And there were cries of why, followed by cries of why not. And can I reach out to you if that feels good to me? And the riders will not stop us, 'cause the only love they'll find is paradise. No, the riders will not stop us, 'cause the only love they'll find is paradise, yeah. All right. That was the best I could do just now. I was rushing to get here. I know I'm really, really late. All I can say is that it's going to just be like this now. Work is busy, and, you know, trying to squeeze in a meal and all the other things that get in the way. It's super frustrating for me, and I'm really, really sorry. I don't want to start at 7:45 either, but I didn't want to put it off till tomorrow. Hi, Anita. Good to see you, hon. I'm sure I've lost my cousin, who's probably on her lunch break. Holy Hannah, is it hot in here? Whew. Anyway, so I do apologize for that. What did I want to... I wanted to mention last night, I posted on Facebook that I saw that movie, Trial of the Chicago 7? Trial of the Chicago 7, yeah. What an amazing movie. Like, absolutely incredible. I was bawling my eyes out like 4 different times just from the pure frustration of watching this film. It's a true story about the trial of 7 individuals who were basically used as examples for to represent a bunch of people who were demonstrating during the U.S. National Convention, I think it was, in I think 68, I want to say. And these 7 guys got picked out of the crowd for inciting the riot, when in actual fact it was the police that started the riot. It's such an incredible story, and very well told by Aaron Sorkin. I think that's his name. Yeah. Yeah. Make sure you watch it. The scene where they bind and gag, I think is the character's Bobby, and put him back in the chair. I mean, you just can't even believe that this stuff actually happened in a trial, you know, in a first world country, the U.S. of all places. And what it made me think about was how often this kind of thing does happen, you know. The injustices, people not having the right to a fair trial and never getting it, you know what I mean? Hey, Kelly, good to see you, honey. It happens often, more often, so way more often than it should. Which reminded me of, you know, basically both Canada and the U.S. is going through, well, at least British Columbia is going through an election right now. Hey, Matt, good to see you. Amanda, good to see you, honey. Yeah, we have an election coming up in BC. You guys down south of the border have your election coming up as well. So really what it did to me is it just reminded me of the importance of getting out there and casting your vote. And it's not, I'm not trying to step on a soapbox, and I'm the least political person you'll ever meet. However, I am an expert on affecting change. I'm really good at that. I know how to affect change. Steve, good to see you. And if you really want to affect change in your community and you know, ensure that you're going to have what you need for your future, you got to get out there and vote. You got to make sure your voice is heard and counted. You got to make sure that you have the representatives, both locally, provincially, and federally, who have your best interest in mind. And so this Friday in BC is, I believe, the last day. Saturday, the 24th, is voting day. I think you can pre-register to vote. Bottom line, take that paid hour off to go to the local elementary school and make sure you cast your vote. Because when I see the shit that goes on in these courtrooms and across the land, and just like, even us, like our age group, we're getting to that age now where we seriously have to think about that. It's not like you can just say slough it off and go, oh, whatever. No, it matters now. Like, we're now preparing we're going to be preparing for retirement soon. Some people already are. And, you know, we want to make sure that all those tax dollars we've been paying are going to the places we need them to go. You know, that God, I'd love to see a pension. I don't think that's going to happen. But you know what? Maybe it could. You know, and that's the thing. If we really want these things for ourselves, then we have to make sure our voices are heard and that we are counted. And I don't care who you support somebody though. And I'll tell you one thing, I don't want to hear shit about your opinions of the government if you didn't vote. You know what I mean? Like, that's the one thing. You're buying your right to bitch and moan about everything that's going on in society. And, you know, it's a small price to pay, especially for someone like me. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. And of course, and it made me think of that fantastic quote. I even printed it off so I get it right, by Margaret Mead, which says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And I mean, I know it by heart, but I just didn't want to mess it up. Margaret Mead wrote that. I love it because it's so true. You just, bottom line, if you want to really affect changes, just make sure you get out there, okay? I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to waste too much time because I am so late getting in. What else was I going to mention? Hi, Sky. Hi, honey. I hope you didn't have to break your lunch hour or whatever to be here. I was just explaining at the top. I'm working late. I have like 5 units to rent out right now, so I have to take a showing appointment, an appointment to show my suites over this. I just have to, and if I have to push this, I just, you know, that's how she goes. And actually, to be quite honest, like, and just for those who don't know, I'm reading The Witches by Roald Dahl, written in 1983. And actually, this is the second to last night. I just counted the pages and I realized that we're nearing the end. I'll be starting another one after that, though. I'm going to try and find something intriguing leading us into Halloween. Ooh. I was at my cousin Michelle's yesterday and hanging out with Broden, and I was like, doing my witch's laugh. And he was giving me, oh, we had such a good laugh yesterday. He's got the whole yard all tricked out with webs and big blow-ups stuff, and I can't wait. I'm going to go hang out with them on Halloween, and we're gonna try and have as much fun as humanly possible. I'll take one of your apartments. Hey babe, come on over. I just rented one to my buddy from high school, Julius Pierbon's friend, Cheyenne. She's just moved in the other day, so the more the merrier. How rad would that be? I swear I'd love to rent all my suites to my friends. It would just be like one big party all the time. Brittany, hi babe, good to see you. Anyway, why don't I just launch right into it, and so I don't have to take up too much of your time this evening. If you remember correctly, the last I was reading, dink, 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 and it just was, even though I don't know his mask, couldn't tell my darling, she cried, give me a hug, I thought I'd never see you again, I'm so happy you got away. Oh yeah, so, he got away, he got that bottle, the bottle of the I don't know, mouse maker stuff, and now it's Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins meet Bruno. Remember his little buddy Bruno, who's, you know, can't stop eating. So, moving on. Thanks for joining me, everybody, and here we go. My grandmother carried me back into her own bedroom and put me on the table. She set the precious bottle down beside me. What time are those witches having supper in the dining room? She said. 8 o'clock, I said. She looked at her watch. Well, it's now just 6:10, she said. We've got until 8 o'clock to work out our next move. Sorry. Suddenly, her eye fell upon Bruno. He was still in the banana bowl on the table. He had eaten 3 bananas and was now attacking the 4th. He had become immensely fat. That's quite enough, my grandmother said, lifting him out of the bowl and putting him on the tabletop. I think it's time we return to this little fellow to the bosom of his family. Don't you agree, Bruno? Bruno scowled at her. I'd never seen a mouse scowl before, but he managed it. My parents let me eat as much as I want, he said. I'd rather be with them than you. Dick. Of course you would, my grandmother said. Do you know where your parents might be at this moment? They were in the lounge not long ago. They were in the lounge not long ago, I said. I saw them there, sitting there, as we dashed through on our way up here. Right, my grandmother said. Let's go and see if they're still there. Do you want to come along? She added, looking at me. Oh, yes, please, I said. I shall put you both in my handbag, she said. Keep quiet and stay out of sight. If you must peep out now and again, don't show more than your nose. Her handbag was a large, bulgy black leather affair with a tortoise-shell clasp. She picked up Bruno and me and popped us into it. I shall leave the clasp undone, she said, but be sure to keep out of sight. Every now and then I've got that whistle, like, sorry about that. I had no intention of keeping out of sight. I wanted to see everything. I seated myself in a little side pocket inside the bag near the clasp. From there, I was able to poke my head out whenever I wanted to. Hey, Bruno called out, give me the rest of that banana I was eating. Oh, all right, my grandmother said. Anything to keep you quiet. She dropped the half-eaten banana into the bag, then slung the bag over her arm and marched out of the room and went thumping along the corridor with her walking stick. We went down on the left to the ground floor and made our way through the reading room to the lounge. And there, sure enough, there, sure enough, sat Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins in a couple of armchairs with a low, round, glass-covered table between them. There were several other groups in there as well, but the Jenkins were the only couple sitting alone. Mr. Jenkins was reading a newspaper. Mrs. Jenkins was knitting something large and mustard-colored. Hey, Jen. Nice to see you, babe. Only my nose and eyes were above the clasp of my grandmother's handbag, but I had a super view. I could see everything. My grandmother, dressed in black lace, went thumping across the floor of the lounge and halted in front of the Jenkins' table. Are you Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins? She said. Mr. Jenkins looked at her over the top of his newspaper and frowned. Yes, he said. I am Mr. Jenkins. What can I do for you, madam? I'm afraid I have some rather alarming news for you, she said. It's about your son, Bruno. What about Bruno? Mr. Jenkins said. Mrs. Jenkins looked up, but went on knitting. What's the little blighter been up to now? Mr. Jenkins asked. Raiding the kitchen, I suppose. Well, it's worse than that, my grandmother said. Do you think we might go somewhere more private while I tell you about it? Private? Mr. Jenkins asked. Why do we have to be private? This is not an easy thing for me to explain, my grandmother said. Sorry, I'm just going to push this back a bit here. This is not an easy thing for me to explain, my grandmother said. I'd much rather we all went up to your room and sat down before I tell you any more. Hi, Lisa. Nice to see you, babe. Mr. Jenkins lowered his paper. Mrs. Jenkins stopped knitting. I don't want to go up to my room, madam, Mr. Jenkins said. I'm quite comfortable here, thank you very much. But he was a large, coarse man, and he wasn't used to being pushed around by anybody. Kindly state your business and then leave us alone, he added. He spoke as though he was addressing someone who was trying to sell him a vacuum cleaner at the back door. My poor grandmother, who had been doing her best to be as kind to them as possible, now began to bristle a bit herself. We can't talk here, she said. There are too many people. This is a rather delicate and personal matter. I'll talk where I dashed well want to, madam, Mr. Jenkins said. Come on now, out with it. If Bruno has broken a window or smashed your spectacles, then I'll pay for the damage. But I'm not budging out of this seat. One or two other groups in the room were beginning to stare at us now. Where is Bruno anyway? Mr. Jenkins said. Tell him to come here and see me. He's here already, my grandmother said. He's in my handbag. She patted the big floppy leather bag with her walking stick. What the heck do you mean he's in your handbag? Mr. Jenkins shouted. Are you trying to be funny? Mrs. Jenkins said, very prim. There's nothing funny about this, my grandmother said. Your son has suffered a rather unfortunate mishap. He's always suffering mishaps, Mr. Jenkins said. He suffers from overeating and then he suffers from wind. You should hear him after supper. He sounds like a brass band, but a good dose of castor oil soon puts him right again. Where is the little beggar? Oops. I've already told you, my grandmother said. He's in my handbag. But I do think it might be better if we went somewhere else private before you meet him in his present state. This woman's mad, Mrs. Jenkins said. Tell her to go away. The plain fact is, my grandmother said, that your son Bruno has been rather drastically altered. Altered, shouted Mr. Jenkins. What the devil do you mean by altered? Go away, Mrs. Jenkins said. You're a silly old woman. I'm trying to tell you as gently as I possibly can that Bruno really is in my handbag, my grandmother said. My own grandson actually saw them doing it to him. Saw who doing what to him, for heaven's sake? Shouted Mr. Jenkins. He had a black mustache, which jumped up and down when he shouted. Saw the witches turning him into a mouse, my grandmother said. Call the manager, dear, Mrs. Jenkins said to her husband. Have this mad woman thrown out of this hotel. At this point, my grandmother's patience came to an end. She fished around in her handbag and found Bruno. She lifted him out and dumped him on the glass-top table. Hi, Em. You're late again. I'm watching the beginning and the end. Okay. Dumped him on the glass-top table. Mrs. Jenkins took one look at the fat little brown mouse who was still chewing a bit of banana, and she let out a shriek that rattled the crystals on the chandelier. She sprang out of her chair, yelling, It's a mouse! Take it away! I can't stand the things! It's Bruno, my grandmother said. Oh, you nasty, cheeky old woman, shouted Mr. Jenkins. He started flapping his newspaper at Bruno, trying to sweep him off the table. My grandmother rushed forward and managed to grab hold of him before he was swept away. Mrs. Jenkins was still screaming her head off, and Mr. Jenkins was towering over us, shouting, Get out of here! How dare you frighten my wife like that? Take your filthy mouse away this instant! Help! Screamed Mrs. Jenkins. Her face had gone the color of the underside of a fish. Well, I did my best, my grandmother said. And with that, she turned and sailed out of the room, carrying Bruno with her. Hi! The plan. Yeah. Oh, I'm just drinking Orange Crush tonight. I've decided to cut out the ciders and shit, all the vodka for a while. I'm getting too portly. Fuck. Oh, my back hurts. COVID's here to stay, so I'm going to start taking care of myself again. Anyway, the plan. When we got back to the bedroom, my grandmother took both me and Bruno out of her handbag and put us on the table. Why on earth didn't you speak up and tell your father who you were? She said to Bruno. Because I had my mouth full, Bruno said. The greedy old pig. He jumped straight back into the bowl of bananas and went on with his eating. What a very disagreeable little boy you are, my grandmother said to him. Not boy, I said. Mouse. Quite right, my darling. But we don't have time to worry about him at this moment. We have plans to make. In about an hour and a half's time, all the witches will be going down to supper in the dining room, right? Right, I said. And every one of them has got to be given a dose of mouse maker, she said. How on earth are we going to do that? Grandmama, I said, I think you were forgetting that a mouse can go places where human beings can't. That's quite right, she said. But even a mouse can't go creeping around on the tabletop carrying a bottle and sprinkling mouse maker all over the witch's roast beef without being spotted. I wasn't thinking of doing it in the dining room, I said. Then where? She said. In the kitchen. where their food is being got ready. Oh, man, Chinese food's coming back at me. My grandmother stared at me. My darling child, she said slowly, I do believe that they're turning you into a mouse has doubled your brain power. A little mouse, I said, can go scuttling round the kitchen among the pots and pans, and if he's very careful, no one will see him. Brilliant, my grandmother cried out. By golly, I think you've got it. The only thing is, I said, how will I know which food is theirs? I don't want to put it in the wrong saucepan. It would be disastrous if I turned all the other guests into mice by mistake, and especially you, Grandmama. Then you'll just have to creep into the kitchen and find a good hiding place and wait. And listen. Just lie there in some dark cranny listening and listen to what the cooks are saying. Then, with a bit of luck, somebody's going to give you a clue. Whenever they have a very big party to cook for, the food is always prepared separately. Right, I said. That's what I'll have to do. I shall wait there, and I shall listen, and I shall hope for a bit of luck. It's going to be very dangerous, my grandmother said. Nobody welcomes a mouse in the kitchen. If they see you, they'll squash you to death. I won't let them see me, I said. Don't forget you'll be carrying the bottle, she said, so you won't be nearly so quick and nimbly. I can run quite fast standing up with the bottle in my arms, I said. I did it just now, don't you remember? I came all the way up from the Grand High Witch's room carrying it. What about unscrewing the top, she said. That might be difficult for you. Let me try, he said. I said. I took hold of the little bottle, using both my front paws. I found I was able to unscrew the cap quite easily. That's great, my grandmother said. You really are a very clever mouse. She glanced at her watch. At 7:30, she said, I shall go down to the dining room for supper with you in my handbag. I shall then release you under the table together with the precious bottle, and from then on you'll be on your own. You will have to work your way unseen across the dining room to the door that leads into the kitchen. There will be waiters going in and out of the door all the time. You will have to choose the right moment and nip in behind one of them. But for heaven's sake, be sure. Hey, Rod, good to see you, honey. Hi! Rod, everybody, Rod. You will have to choose the right moment and nip in behind one of them. But for heaven's sake, be sure that you don't get trodden on or squeezed into the door. I'll try not to, I said. And whatever happens, you mustn't let them catch you. Don't go on about it, Grandmama. You're making me nervous. You're a brave little fellow, she said. And I do love you. But what shall we do with Bruno? I asked her. Bruno looked up. I'm coming with you, he said, speaking with his mouthful of banana. I'm not going to miss my supper. My grandmother considered this for a moment. I'll take you along, she said, but if you promise to stay in my bag and keep absolutely silent. Will you pass food down to me from the table? Bruno asked. Yes, she said, if you promise to behave yourself. Would you like something to eat, my darling? She said to me. No, thank you, I said. I'm too excited to eat. And I've got to keep fit and frisky for the big job ahead. It's a big job, all right, my grandmother said. You'll never do a bigger one. That's what she said. In the kitchen. The time has come, my grandmother said. The great moment has arrived. Are you ready, my darling? It was exactly 7:30. Bruno was in the bowl fishing for the 4th banana. Hang on, he said. Just a few more bites. No, my grandmother said. We've got to go. She picked him up and held him tight in her hand. She was very tense and nervous. I'd never seen her like that before. I'm going to put you both in my handbag now, she said, but I shall leave the clasp undone. She popped Bruno in there first. I waited, clutching the little bottle to my chest. Now you, she said. She picked me up and gave me a kiss on the nose. Good luck, my darling. Oh, by the way, you do realize you've got a tail, don't you? A what? I said. A tail, a long curly tail. I must say that never occurred to me, I said. Good gracious me, so I have. I can see it now. I can actually move it. It's rather grand, isn't it? I mention it only because it might come in useful when you're climbing about in the kitchen, my grandmother said. You can curl it around and you can hook it on things and you can swing from it and lower yourself to the ground from high places. I wish I'd known this before, I said. I could have been practicing using it. Too late now, my grandmother said. You've got to go. She popped me into her handbag with Bruno, and at once I took up my usual perch in the small side pocket so that I could poke my head out and see what was going on. My grandmother picked up her walking stick, and out she went into the corridor to the lift. She pressed the button, and the lift came up, and she got in. There was no one in there with us. Listen, she said, I won't be able to talk to you much once we're in the dining room. If I do, people might think I'm dotty and talking to myself. The lift reached the ground floor and stopped with a jerk. My grandmother walked out. Good Lord. I hit do not disturb. Doesn't that actually cancel every noise out? Anyway. Listen, I won't be able to talk to you. Right. The lift reached the ground floor and stopped with a jerk. My grandmother walked out of it and crossed the lobby of the hotel and entered the dining room. It was a huge room with gold decorations on the ceiling and big mirrors around the walls. The regular guests always had their tables reserved for them, and most of them were already in their places, starting to eat their suppers. Waiters were buzzing about all over the place, carrying plates and dishes. Our table was a small one, beside the right-hand wall about halfway down the room. My grandmother made her way to it and sat down. Peeping out of the handbag, I could see in the very center of the room 2 long tables that were not yet occupied. Each of them carried a notice fixed onto a sort of silver stick, and the notices said, "Reserved for members of the RSPCC." My grandmother looked towards the long tables, but said nothing. She unfolded her napkin and spread it over the handbag on her lap. Her hand slid under the napkin and took hold of me gently. With the napkin covering me, she lifted me up close to her face and whispered, "I'm about to put you on the floor under the table. The tablecloth reaches almost to the ground, so no one will be seeing you. Have you got hold of the bottle?" "Yes," I whispered back. "I'm ready, Grandmama." Just then, a waiter in black suit came and stood by our table. I could see his legs from under the napkin, and as soon as I heard his voice, I knew who he was. And his name was William. "Good evening, madam," he said to my grandmother. "Where is the little gentleman tonight?" "Oh, I'm afraid he's not feeling well," my grandmother said. "He's staying in his room." "Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that," William said. "Today there is green pea soup to start with. And for the main course, you have a choice of either grilled fillet of sole or roast lamb." "Pea soup and lamb for me, please," my grandmother said. "But don't hurry it, William. I'm in no rush tonight. In fact, you can bring me a glass of dry sherry first." Remember the days of sherry? "Hey, Shelley. Good to see you, honey." "Of course, madam," William said, and he went away. My grandmother pretended she had dropped something, and she bent down. She slid me out from under the napkin onto the floor under the table. "Go, darling, go," she whispered. Then she straightened up again. I was on my own now. I stood clasping the little bottle. I knew exactly where the door into the kitchen was. I had to go about halfway round the enormous dining room to reach it. Here it goes, I thought. And like a flash, I skittled out from under the table and made for the hall. I had no intention of going across the dining room floor. It was far too risky. My plan was to cling close to the skirting of the wall all the way round until I reached the kitchen door. I ran. Oh, how I ran. I don't think anybody saw me. They were all too busy eating. But to reach the door leading to the kitchen, I had to cross the main entrance to the dining room. I was just about to do this when it poured a great flood of females. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching the bottle. At first, I saw only the shoes and ankles of these women who were surging in through the door. But when I glanced up a bit higher, I knew at once who they were. They were the witches coming in for dinner. I waited until they'd all passed me by. Then I dashed on towards the kitchen door. A waiter opened it to go in. I nipped in after him and hid behind a big garbage bin on the floor. I stayed there for several minutes, just listening to all the talk and the racket. By golly, what a place this kitchen was. The noise, and the steam, and the clatter of pots and pans, and the cooks all shouting, and the waiters all rushing in and out from the dining room, yelling the food orders to the cooks. 4 soups and 2 lambs and 2 fish for table 28. 3 apple pies and 2 strawberry ice creams to number 17. Geez, I remember those days. Hey, Shelley? Stuff like that going on all the time. Not far above my head, there was a handle sticking out from the side of the garbage bin. Still clutching the bottle, I gave a leap, turned a somersault in the air. Hey, Dino. Nice to see you, babe. Turned a somersault in the air and caught hold of the handle with the end of my tail. Suddenly, there I was, swinging to and fro, upside down. It was terrific. I loved it. This, I told myself, is how a trapeze artist in a circus must feel as he goes swishing through the air high up in the circus tent. The only difference was that his trapeze could only swing backwards and forwards. My trapeze, my tail, could swing me in any direction I wanted. Perhaps I would become a circus mouse after all. Dreams really do come true. Just then, a waiter came in with a plate in his hand, and I heard him saying, "The old hag at table 14 says the meat is too tough. She wants another portion." One of the cooks said, "Give me your plate." I dropped to the floor and peeped round the garbage bin. I saw the cook scrape the meat off the plate and slap another bit on. Then he said, "Come on, boys, give her some gravy." He carried the plate round to everyone in the kitchen. And do you know what they did? Every one of those cooks and kitchen boys spat on the old lady's plate. "See how she likes it now," said the cook, handing the plate back to the waiter. Quite soon, another waiter came in and he shouted, "Everyone in the big RSPCC party wants soup." That's when I started sitting up and taking notice. I was all ears now. I edged a bit further round the garbage bin so that I could see everything that was going on in the kitchen. A man with a tall white hat, who must have been the head chef, shouted, "Put the soup for the big party in the large silver soup tureen." I saw the head chef place a huge silver basin on a wooden side bench that ran along the whole length of the kitchen against the opposite wall. "Into that silver basin is where the soup is going," I told myself. "So that's where the stuff in my little bottle must go as well." I noticed that high up, near the ceiling, above the side bench, there was a long shelf crammed with saucepans and frying pans. If I can somehow clamber up onto that shelf, I thought, then I've got it made. I shall be directly above the silver basin. But first, I must somehow get across the other side of the kitchen and then up onto the middle shelf. A great idea came to me. Once again, I jumped up and hooked my tail around the handle of the garbage bin. Then, hanging upside down, I began to swing. Higher and higher I swung. I was remembering the trapeze artist in the circus I had seen last Easter, and the way he had got the trapeze swinging higher and higher and higher, and had then let go and gone flying through the air. So just at that right moment, at the top of my swing, I let go with my tail and went soaring clear across the kitchen and made a perfect landing on the middle shelf. By golly, I thought, what marvelous things a mouse can do, and I'm only a beginner. Talk about glass half full, eh? No one had seen me. They were all far too busy with their pots and pans. From the middle shelf, I somehow managed to shinny up a little water pipe in the corner, and in no time at all I was up on the very top shelf, just under the ceiling, among all the saucepans and the frying pans. I knew that no one could possibly see me up there. It was a superposition, and I began working my way along the shelf until I was directly above the big empty silver basin they were going to pour the soup into. I put down my bottle. I unscrewed the top and crept to the edge of the shelf and quickly poured what was in it straight into the silver basin below. The next moment, one of the cooks came along with a gigantic saucepan of steaming green soup and poured the whole lot into the silver basin. He put the lid on the basin and shouted, "Soup for the big party, all ready to go out." Then a waiter arrived and carried the silver basin away. I had done it! Even if I never got back alive to my grandmother, the witches were still going to get the mouse maker. I left the empty bottle behind a large saucepan and began working my way back along the top shelf. It was much easier to move about without the bottle. I began using my tail more and more. I swung from the handle of one saucepan to the handle of another, all the way along that top shelf. While far below me, cooks and waiters were all bustling about, and kettles were steaming, and pans were spluttering, and pots were boiling. And I thought to myself, oh boy, this is the life. What fun it is to be a mouse doing an exciting job like this. I kept right on swinging. I swung most marvelously from handle to handle, and I was enjoying myself so much that I completely forgot I was in a full view of anyone in the kitchen who might happen to glance upwards. What came next happened so quickly, I had no time to save myself. I heard a man's voice yelling, "It's a mouse! Look at that dirty little mouse!" I caught a glimpse below me of a white-coated figure in a tall white hat, and then there was a flash of steel as the carving knife whizzed through the air, and there was a shoot of pain in the end of my tail, and suddenly I was falling head first towards the floor. Even as I fell, I knew just what had happened. I knew that the tip of my tail had been cut off, and that I was about to crash onto the floor, and everyone in the kitchen would be after me. "A mouse!" they were shouting. "A mouse! A mouse! Catch it quick!" I hit the floor and jumped up, ran for my life. All around me there were big black boots going stamp, 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 and I dodged around them and ran, twisting and turning and dodging and swerving around across the kitchen floor. "Get it!" they were shouting. "Get it! Stomp on it!" The whole floor seemed to be full of black boots stamping away at me, and I dodged and swerved and twisted and turned, and then, in sheer desperation, hardly knowing what I was doing, wanting only a place to hide, I ran up the trouser leg of one of the cooks and clung to his sock. "Hey!" the cook shouted. "Jeepers creepers! He's gone up my trouser! Hold on, boys! I'll get him this time!" The man's hands began slapping at the trousers, and now I really was going to get smashed if I didn't move quickly. There was only one way to go, and that was up. I dug my little claws into the hairy skin of the man's leg and scuttled upwards, higher and higher, past the calf and past the knee and onto the thigh. "Holy smoke!" the man was yelling. "It's going all the way up! It's going right up my leg!" I heard shrieks of laughter coming from the other cooks, but I can promise you I wasn't laughing myself. I was running for my life. The man's hands were slapping all around me. He was jumping up and down as though he was standing on hot bricks. And I kept climbing and I kept dodging, and very soon I reached the very top of the trouser leg, and there was nowhere else to go. Sorry. "Help! Help! Help!" the man was screaming. "It's in my knickers! It's running round in my flaming knickers! Get it out! Someone help me get it out!" "Take off your trousers, you silly slob!" someone else shouted. Pull down your pants and we'll soon catch him." I was in the middle of the man's trousers now, in the place where the two trouser legs meet and the zip begins. It was dark and awfully hot in there. I knew I had to keep going. I dashed onward and found the top of the other trouser leg. I went down it like greased lightning. Greased lightning! Anyway, sorry, had to say that. And came out at the bottom of it, and once again, I was on the floor. I heard the stupid cook still shouting, "It's in my trousers! Get it out! Will somebody please help me get it out before it bites me?" I caught a flashing glimpse of the entire kitchen staff crowding round him and laughing their heads off. Nobody saw a little brown mouse as it flew across the floor and dived into a sack of potatoes. Burrowed down in among the dirty potatoes and held my breath. The cook must have started taking his trousers right off because now they were shouting, "It's not in there! There's no mice in there, you silly twerp!" Sorry guys, I got something in my throat. "There was, I swear there was," the man was shouting back. "You never had a mouse in your trousers. You don't know what it feels like." The fact that a tiny little creature like me had caused such a commotion among a bunch of grown-up men kind of gave me a happy feeling. I couldn't help smiling in spite of the pain in my tail. I stayed where I was until I was sure they had forgotten about me. Then I crept out of the potatoes and cautiously poked my tiny head over the edge of the sack. Once again, the kitchen was all of a bustle, with cooks and waiters rushing about everywhere. I saw the waiter who had come in earlier with a complaint about tough meat coming in again. "Hey boys," he shouted. "I asked the old hag if the new bit of meat was any better, and she said it was perfectly delicious. She said it was really tasty." I had to get out of that kitchen and back to my grandmother. There was only one way to do this. I must make a dash clear across the floor and out through that door behind one of the waiters. I stayed quite still, watching for my chance. My tail was hurting terribly. I curled it round so as to have a look at it. About 2 inches of it were missing, and it was bleeding quite a lot. There was a waiter loading up with a batch of plates full of pink ice cream. He had a plate in each hand and 2 more balanced on each arm. He went towards the door. He pushed it open with his shoulder. I leaped out of the sack of potatoes and went across the kitchen floor and into the dining room like a streak of light. And I didn't stop running until I was underneath my grandmother's table. It was lovely to see my grandmother's feet again in those old-fashioned black shoes with their straps and buttons. I shinnied up one of her legs and landed on her lap. "Hello, Grandma," I whispered. "I'm back. I did it. I poured it all into their soup." Her hand came down and caressed me. "Well done, my darling," she whispered back. "Well done, you. They are at this very moment eating that soup." Suddenly, she withdrew her hand. "Oh, you're bleeding," she whispered. "My darling, what's happened to you?" One of the cooks cut off my tail with a carving knife," I whispered back. "It hurts like billy-o." "Let me look at it," she said. She bent her head and examined my tail. "Oh, you poor little thing," she whispered. "I'm going to bandage it up with my handkerchief. That will stop the bleeding." She fished a small lace-edged handkerchief out of the bag, and this she somehow managed to wrap around the end of my tail. Sorry, work thing. Around my tail. "You'll be all right now," she said. "Just try to forget about it." "Did you really manage to pour the whole bottle into their soup?" "Every drop," I said. "Phil! Hi, Phil. Hey, Will. Hey, Colette." "Every drop," I said. "Do you think you could put me where I can watch them?" "Yes," she answered. "My handbag is on your own empty chair beside me. I'm going to pop you in there now, and you can peep out as long as you are careful not to be seen. Bruno is in there as well, but take no notice of him. I gave him a roll to eat, and that's keeping him busy for a while." Her hand closed around me, and I was lifted off her lap and transferred to the bag. "Hello, Bruno," I said. "This is a great roll," he said, nibbling away in the bottom of the bag. "But I wish there was butter on it." I peered over the top of the handbag. I could see the witches quite clearly sitting at their 2 long tables in the center of the room. They had finished their soup now, and the waiters were clearing away the plates. My grandmother had lit up one of her disgusting black cigars and was puffing smoke over everything. All around us, the summer holiday guests in their rather grand hotel was babbling away and tucking into their suppers. About half of them were old people with walking sticks, but there were also plenty of families with a husband, a wife, and several children. They were all well-to-do people. You had to be if you wanted to stay in the Hotel Magnificent. "That's her, Grandmama," I whispered. "That's the Grand High Witch." "I know," my grandmother whispered back. "She's the tiny one in black sitting at the head of the nearest table." "She could kill you," I said. "She could kill anyone in this room with her white hot sparks." "Look out," my grandmother whispered. "The waiter's coming." I popped down out of sight, and I heard William saying, "Your roast lamb, madam. And which vegetable would you like, peas or carrots?" "Carrots, please," my grandmother said, "but no potatoes." I heard the carrots being dished out. There was a pause. Then my grandmother's voice was whispering, "It's all right, he's gone." I popped my head up again. "Surely no one will notice my little head sticking out like this," I whispered. "No," she answered. "I don't suppose that they will. My problem is I've got to talk to you without moving my lips." "You're doing beautifully," I said. "I counted the witches," she said. "There aren't nearly as many as you thought. You were just guessing, weren't you, when you said 200? "Well, it seemed like 200, I said. "I was wrong too," Grandmother said. "I thought there were a lot more witches than this in England." "How many are there?" I asked. 84, she said. "There were 85, I said, but one of them got fried." At that moment, I caught sight of Mr. Jenkins, Bruno's father, heading straight for our table. "Look out, Grandmama," I whispered. "Here comes Bruno's father." And I'll stop it there. the next chapter is Mr. Jenkins and his son. I have a feeling he's going to finally see his son in his new state as a mouse. And I'm going to assume he's not going to take it very well, but who knows. Anyway, thanks very much for hanging. What is it, 8:28? All right. Yeah, I started at 7:30, 7:40 or something, so that's about right, 40, 50 minutes. Again, sorry I had to start late, but these days I've got, like I said, I've got rentals, and if I have to do showings after work, it'll just have to be later. You can just watch it later. Sorry about that, though. Next week, or sorry, Thursday will be the last one for this book, actually. So, like I said, I've never read the book, I've never seen the movie, I haven't got a clue how it's going to end, so I'm just as riveted as you. So with that, I think I'll let you go and get on with your evening. I'm absolutely knackered. I'm sorry I was kind of stumbling with that. I almost didn't read tonight. I'm just like ready to slip into my bed and go right to sleep. So I hope you guys have a lovely evening. Thank you again for joining me as always. And I will see you on Thursday, probably about 7:20. Just honestly, it's going to be about that. And that way, if it's 7:30, you won't kill me. So until then, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, I love you, and I appreciate you so much coming by to see me. Thanks, Sky. I know you can see the bags. You can't see this candlelight really does hide bags well. I'm just like, I actually put my face on just for you guys. I was like, honestly, I was like, oh, maybe it won't bother, but it wouldn't work right with all the videos if I looked different. I used to not give a shit, but, you know, I do that for you guys because I love you. Good night. Good night, Emily. Good night, good night, good night. Love you guys.